Hi, my name's Chris, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I made this simple garage storage shelf that's on wheels. So it's easy to move around. If you want to see how I built this shelf, stick around. Now, my shop gear has overtaken this thing, but not too long ago I had a whole bunch of household stuff that I kept stored on here. I actually stored it on the shelf at my last house, moved it on a moving truck to our current house, and then had it over here off camera for about 6 months before I moved it to a different location. But the best thing about it was moving it is super easy. It's on wheels. So although this is a pretty simple build, I did draw plans for it, and those are available on Etsy. It's got everything you need from the hardware to some tips on getting everything cut. And if you're interested, go check it out.
So this is a really simple project to put together. Anyone can do this, and you don't need any special tools like a table saw or a miter saw. I had my plywood cut at the home center, and you could also have your 2x4s cut there. About the only tool you need is a driller driver and some glue to get this thing together. And of course you end up with 32 square feet of storage. Now materials wise, I used 8 10-foot 2x4s. I realized the price of lumber's gone up quite a bit since I made this shelf and recorded this video, but you could also substitute some smaller dimensional lumber like 2x3s and save a little bit on costs. And then OSB is a great plywood substitute also. First thing I did was cut my 4 columns to length. I chose to make them 75 inches long so that the completed shelf would still be able to roll underneath an open garage door. There's a lot of repeated cuts in this project, so I used a clamp as a stop block. After cutting the 4 vertical columns, I cut 4 pieces for the bottom frame and 4 pieces for the top frame. Here I am laying out the bottom pieces of the frame. This will form the first shelf that the casters will mount to. To assemble this, I first secured it together with glue and some screws, and then came back and added glue and tacked on the first shelf layer of plywood with brad nails. I felt that using glue was really important for the long-term durability of the shelf. Next, I turned the shelf over and attached the casters with some small screws and washers. If I were building a shelf like this again, I would wait to attach the casters until I had assembled the main frame. This would allow me to get the plates of the casters to be underneath the columns and the bottom frame. I've had weight on my shelf for almost a year now, and there's no signs of fatigue or failure, but I think that this would make the shelf significantly more strong by transferring the load of the shelves directly into the casters. Here I am assembling the top frame of the shelf. Like the bottom, I just used glue and some 3-inch screws. When I built my shelf, I decided to build the outer frame first and then come back in and add the shelf supports and shelves later. Now looking back on this build, if I were to do it again, what I recommend is building the 2 long sides first and then assembling the shelf into a frame by attaching the top and bottom. I think that this would make laying out the heights of the shelves a lot easier because you could build the 2 frames side by side on the ground. I think you'll see what I mean in just a minute. After standing up the assembled frame and moving it outside, I cut the rest of the shelf hanger pieces, most of the ones shown in gray and red here in the image. I used a stop block again to batch out some repeated cuts. Next, I marked the locations for each of the heights of the shelf supports. I also cut a spacer block to hold each of the shelf supports at the correct height so that I could attach them. This is what I was referring to earlier, where I think it'd be better to build each of the halves of the shelf on the ground laying down. and then assemble it and stand it up. After the horizontal shelf supports were attached with screws, I then glued and brad nailed the plywood shelves onto each rung. The last thing I did was attach the smaller horizontal supports in between the two longer supports. This gives the shelf additional strength and prevents it from flexing. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully building this shelf helps you organize your garage and makes it easier whenever you want to rearrange things. Just having everything on wheels, I find makes it more user-friendly. There's plans available if you want to go check that out. But regardless, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. Thanks.